The key of connectedness. Notice that life works. We begin with these quotes. We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. Robert Frost. The secret sits. Everything is a miracle. It is a miracle one does not dissolve into one's bath like a lump of sugar. Pablo Picasso. We try to explain the strange in terms of the familiar, but sometimes it just won't stop being strange. George Johnson. The sixth key to calm. There's a day in my life I'll never forget. I was just 21, a freshly minted college graduate. I was in New York City looking for a job in book publishing, along with a zillion or so similar hopefuls. I didn't know a soul in the book business, had no friends or contacts to rely on. My only professional experience with literature had been a brief stint working at a bookstore. In short, I was as green as a Granny Smith apple. I answered ads from the New York Times and arrived at interviews clutching a binder full of writing samples. These included regular columns I had written for my college paper and short stories published in college lit magazines. But nobody wanted to see my writing samples. It turned out that interviewers for the positions I was applying for, euphemistically called entry level, were actually interested in typing rather than writing ability. And at typing, I only had limited success. Finally, I applied at an employment agency purporting to specialize in the book business. At their behest, I set off to a well-known publishing firm to interview an assistant in what was known as the traffic department. The available job, I was told, was for someone who would, quote, work closely with the warehouse, unquote, making sure new printings were shipped to stores in a timely fashion. Hardly the glamour I'd anticipated, but I dutifully went forth, still carrying the now increasingly superfluous writing samples. I was told to go to the 21st floor of such and such an address and ask for a woman named Judy Wasserman. In person, I exited the elevator at what I thought was the 21st floor. Judy, I mumbled to the receptionist, trying to retrieve from my purse the slip of paper with the relevant details. I'm here for the job interview. Oh, said the receptionist brightly, you mean Jane Westman. Down the hall, third door on your left. Believing truly that I was in the right place, I interviewed with this Miss Westman for the better part of an hour. She asked me questions about what kind of reading I like to do, whether I enjoyed meeting and working closely with authors, and hallelujah, whether I had any writing samples. As you probably have already figured out, though I genuinely still had not, I was interviewing for the wrong job, with the wrong person. Judy Wasserman, sitting one floor upstairs in the personnel department, was still wondering what had happened to the young woman who was supposed to interview for the trafficking job. But before I left the building, I had a position in the publicity department as a book publicist. It was a field I would work happily in for the better part of the next decade. Happy coincidence, blind chance, dumb luck, call it what you will. But do you want to know something? Virtually everyone I've ever asked has a tale akin to this one to tell. As much as we are made anxious by thought of getting things wrong or making mistakes in our lives, virtually all of us are familiar with the experience of stumbling and blundering our way into great fortune. Blunders and blessings. I know a woman who missed the flight that was to have taken her to an important meeting and then met her husband to be as she sat at the airport stewing over her delay. I know a man who was let go from a job only to dream up the idea for a highly successful business venture with a similarly, quote, downsized colleague he met on a unemployment line. In my therapy practice, I have heard countless stories wherein people, often feeling at their lowest, seem somehow to bump into exactly the right circumstances to resolve their particular problem. Though it may take them a while to recognize these blessings in disguise as such, my guess is that each of you reading this book has also experienced a number of astounding coincidences or quirks of fate. They come when you least expect them. They work in circuitous ways. If asked, you'd probably say these are flukes that defy explanation. But throughout the course of history, psychologists, scientists, and mystics have come up with some fascinating theories on their genesis. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychoanalyst, spoke of something he termed synchronicity, a connecting principle that underlies existence and gives it meaning. When you are thinking of somebody you haven't seen in a long while, and your phone rings and it's that person, that's a garden variety of synchronicity. Jung took synchronicity as evidence that, quote, in all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order, unquote. Many scientists too have posited that things that appear disordered might actually conceal order of an infinitely high degree. Quantum physicist David Bohm elaborated on this idea by referring to a device he himself stumbled across while watching a BBC television program. The device was a glycerin-filled jar containing a large rotating cylinder at its center. Floating in the thick, clear liquid glycerin was one drop of ink. Baum was fascinated to see that when the cylinder was turned by rotating a crank atop the jar, the drop of ink spread throughout the glycerin. As soon as the crank was turned in the opposite direction, however, the ink slowly collapsed on itself, again becoming one droplet. This led Baum to posit that the ink had a, quote, hidden, unquote, order when it was spread out, which was, quote, revealed, unquote, when it was reconstituted. The jar crystallized Baum's thinking and helped him constitute a theory that had been floating about in his own mind, like so many spread out ink for a number of years. The physical universe we perceive, he said, is actually a kind of illusion. Underlying what we see and hear and touch through our ordinary senses is a deep, unfolded order, a more intrinsic level of reality. Baum used the metaphor of a hologram to further explain his vision of the universe. Like a piece of holographic film, he said, the universe we experience is actually a sort of projected image. But within each bit of the universe, as within each bit of holographic film, lies the hidden or unfolded whole, the big picture. How would this explain the astounding coincidences Jung termed synchronicity? Another physicist, David Peat, in his book Synchronicity, The Bridge Between Mind and Matter, theorized that startling, psychologically meaningful coincidences could be explained by Baum's holographic model. He called such coincidences, quote, flaws in the fabric of reality, unquote. They are nothing less than moments, he said, when we get a step outside linear time, suspending our past, present, and future mode of thinking and perceiving, to peek around the corner and see everything revealed at once. Synchronicities, Pete said, also illustrate that our thought processes themselves are more intimately connected with the physical world than most of us ever imagined, because consciousness and matter are merely different manifestations of the same unified entity, just dispersed bits of the same droplets of ink, as it were. We actually possess the latent ability to participate in the creation of reality. Simply put, we may not have simply tripped across business opportunities or found out future fiancés willy nilly. We may, in some way, at certain emotionally charged moments, cause opportunities to be there and cause ourselves to intersect with those opportunities. Of course, if you are familiar with certain aspects of religion and philosophy, such ideas may not be entirely new to you. For millennia, mystics from traditions as diverse as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Kabbalism, the esoteric interpretation of the Hebrew scriptures, have told us that what we think of as, quote, reality, unquote, is nothing more than an illusion filtered through our own senses, which fragment an underlying unity of all things. Behind the illusion, they say, is a far more fundamental order of existence, an infinite interconnectedness. Like today's quantum physicists, who use the hologram as a metaphor to describe inextricable nature of, quote, here, quote, there, and, quote, everywhere. Mystic sages have compared our universe to a countless array of jewels, each with countless facets reflecting in themselves every other jewel in existence. And like David Pete, those sages have long believed that under certain circumstances, we can not only view all the connections and reflections, but also influence the array itself. Now, most of us are neither mystics nor quantum physicists, and this sort of theorizing can sometimes be as overwhelming as it is fascinating. Yet on a gut level, most of us seem to harbor a powerful suspicion that there is more going on in life than meets the eye, even if we don't dare say so aloud. And most of us have found ourselves on occasion awestruck and humbled by the way one thing or another miraculously seems to work out just when we most needed it to. That suspicion, that snippet of awe, is all that's necessary to begin to employ the sixth key to calm. Undertaking the key of connectedness. The sixth key to calm, the key of connectedness, simply states notice that life works. It doesn't say notice why life works or even how life works. There are certain aspects of the how and why of life that may simply be unknowable, but work it does, and noticing it's working can imbue us with a deep sense of calm, because what we can't help but notice if we really pay attention is that the universe appears to be intelligent, even compassionate. Notice how many of life's mistakes turn out to be marvels. Think back over the course of your personal path through life and recall those times when you, quote, failed, unquote, to fulfill a certain dream only to have something even better happen. Something perhaps that you never ever dared to dream of. Think of the times your entire life seemed to be in chaos, but the alleged chaos you later discovered actually contained the seed of your rightful future. Now think not only of your own history, but of history in a larger context. Think about the quote accidents that led to some of the world's greatest discoveries, like that bit of penicillin notatum fungus that fell into a preparation of bacteria a researcher had been planning to throw away, until he noticed that no bacteria grew where the penicillin had fallen. Consider also that the biggest, quote, mistake maker, unquote, on the planet is nothing less than a genetic material from which all life forms are made, the helical molecule of DNA. As the physician Lewis Thomas wrote, the capacity to blunder slightly is the real marvel of DNA. Viewed individually, one by one, each of the mutations that have brought us along represents a random, totally spontaneous accident. But it is no accident at all that mutations occur. The molecule DNA was ordained from the beginning to make small mistakes. A good thing, as he points out, or you and I would be a couple of anaerobic bacteria. A good thing, too, that you and I, who are here by virtue of the existence of DNA, and whatever force or forces may have created and guided it, appear to be similarly ordained to pursue a course of trial and error, or more appropriately put, trial and breakthrough. For if we were confined to a life of certainties, that would be no life at all. We would never experiment, nor would we leave ourselves open for the mysterious forces of synchronicities to work with. And so we would never discover what was really possible. Notice how life uses messes to make progress. No one can deny that life is messy, and messes tend to make us nervous. Caught in mid-mess, we tend to have the feeling that things can only get worse, that the situation can only deteriorate. But look around, and you will see that such is not the rule. Hypothetically, a tendency towards inertia and stagnation taking place in all systems, disorder and randomness inevitably increase throughout the entire universe, and all matter and energy regress towards a state of inert uniformity. This is what's known as entropy. Inexplicably, however, life continually counteracts entropy. Atoms bound into molecules of greater and greater complexity. Bacteria do not get to laze around the planet by themselves, but have to share it with chameleons, crickets, gazelles, giraffes, morning glories, mako sharks, and of course us, who in turn play host to diverse populations of countless microbes within our own bodies. Self-sustaining systems abound, and countless species blossom, buzz, and blow about in unison to their mutual benefit. You need only take a walk in a garden to prove it all to yourself. At first glance, life may appear drunk and disorderly, downright slatternly. But on closer inspection, one notices a method in its madcap shenanigans. Life is full of messes, to be sure, but life actually makes use of them to move forward. Forward towards order, forward towards organization, forward towards synchronization. Like life, we can and somehow do even if we do not mean to make use of our messes. We can play with them, fiddle with them, and ultimately alchemize them into a prolific, productive outcome. Notice how life's little pieces fit together. In the course of daily life, we tend to view things as sequential and one-dimensional. We see cause and effect as a straight, unbroken chain. For example, we break eggs, add butter, put them in a pan, and make breakfast. End of story. But if you really think about it, the story of this simple breakfast goes off in all directions at once. The egg came from a chicken. The chicken ate chicken feed and also swallowed stones to grind up its food in its gizzard. The butter was churned from milk, which came from a cow, which ate the grass, which grew with the aid of rainwater. The frying pan came from a store, and before that, from a factory. The store and factory were both staffed with people who, without realizing it, were instrumental in helping you cook this modest repast so you could begin your day with some energy. And that energy will carry you through the morning in which you will do something productive at your job or in your home. So your deeds of the morning, like your morning meal itself, are in some way concreted by the combined efforts of nature in the form of chickens, cows, stones, and rainwater, and human intent. The intent of the factory workers to make a frying pan, the intent of the store workers to sell the frying pan, and your own intent to manifest a scrambled egg on a plate. Naturally, we can't stand at our range tops musting of such things each moment, or we would never get any breakfast at all. But it's great fun and very useful to indulge such trains of thought from time to time. For when you do so, you can't help but notice that nothing exists in isolation. Everything is connected to everything else, everyone to everyone else, although it would be impossible to ever really understand the complete and unabridged story of what is going on. It's clear something bigger than each of us and bigger than each of our individual worries and problems and struggles is always going on. This realization of interconnectedness is shared in varying degrees by the world's great prophet, artists, scientists, and statesmen, not to mention many highly successful businessmen. The more one sees it, the more creative one is likely to be, and the calmer one is likely to be as well. As though we may grow anxious at times that we are insufficient or that we don't know what we are doing, we may rest assured that we are doing something. We are sounding our individual note in a vast symphony, and there will be in life fleeting moments, synchronous moments, if you will, when if we stop and listen, we can hear perfect harmonies. The key of connectedness in action. No ending is an ending, but only a segue to another beginning. Besides, quote, happiness, unquote, is relative. The busy mind, so anxious to feel satisfied, and so fundamentally incapable of it, imagines happiness is getting all of one's needs met all of the time. But a life without hardship, without challenge, and without its share of sorrows would be less a life than a kind of suspended animation. Looking back through life's intricate web of connections, one can't help but concede it is precisely through enduring hardship of one kind or another that one becomes a broader, more evolved being, more capable of understanding and assisting others and of using that sense of compassion to find peace. Try now and again to recognize the groundwork for your growth in the hardship while you are enduring it, and serenity will be yours. Also, do not for one moment imagine that trusting in the universe absolves you of personal responsibility. I don't have to do anything because the universe will take care of it attitude, alas, not an uncommon one in some so-called spiritual circles, can give hope and faith a bad reputation. To what degree do we create our own reality? Did we in some way choose this life, this family, these circumstances, these particular joys and troubles? If we could say for sure, we probably wouldn't need to be here anymore. But here we are. And if we conduct ourselves on the presumption that we participate in the creation of our reality, we avoid the anxiety that comes from perceiving ourselves as hapless victims. The more one sees life's connections and synchronicities, and even entertains the idea that one is playing a role in them, the more confident and calmer one becomes. The calmer one becomes, the more connections are evident, and the more empowered one feels. It's a fine equation, and one that doesn't require too much scrutiny. Accept what life's mysterious maintaining forces give you, and give back to life what you can, with a calm mind at your service.